And what is reality? Welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Bob. Now, you can make a reality and make whatever you want because that's what God did. Made us different from everybody else in all our relations. People go, "What's so good about human beings?" Well, they have a thumb. Well, many species have opposable thumbs. Yeah, well, they make tools. Many species make tools. They have a language. Many species have languages, right? So, they have empathy, right? They bury their dead. Well, many species do that too. Elephants do that. So, what makes us different? What makes us different is that we can manifest, right? Animals, they basically have to stick to the pattern that they were given, right? So since we came from the garden, and what broke us out of the garden was our ability to manifest, to make a choice, free will. And we did. The devil didn't make us, eat the fruit of good and evil. No, we did it, right? Because we wanted to know. And God wanted us to know. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made Satan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made us, right? And so we are God's science experiment, right? We are his science fair experiment, and that experiment is co-creation, right? And that's when God went down and talked to Moses out there, and Moses did. Moses was very happy. He already had that bling life, and he was very happy being up in that mountain range with the goats and the sheep. And, he had a nice wife, and he had an interesting father-in-law, and he was, enough to eat, a roof over his head. Everything was great. And you had to go to Egypt and free the Hebrew nation. He go, what are you, nuts? Those guys, they want to kill me, Anyway, you hate them. I mean, they're constantly screwing with you, and you constantly have other... the Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Mesopotamians, you name it, they have gone and whacked the, and they weren't even called Israel then. They were the Hebrew nation. And it was Esther who made Israel, right? Made it, that body, right? And it was basically when Moses took the Israel guys out of Egypt, and then put them in the desert for 40 years so they would learn. Meaning, up until the Ten Commandments, there were no... Everybody was just, as my good friend would say, free birds, doing whatever the heck they wanted. No one cared. Seemingly no one cared. Everyone was like Donald Trump, right? I could go out and Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and kill them and get away with it, right? Well, there are these 10 commandments that say you shouldn't be doing that, Donald. And Donald is like, he is like John Birmingham. He is a, gilded cage canary, showing us. I mean, it couldn't be any clearer. This guy gets free TV advertising. If, we have a choice between Biden and Donnie. And it's a very slim choice because it's basically we're going to have the same thing. We're going to end up with martial law. We're going to end up with nuclear detonations on our homeland. We're going to end up with losing 80 to 90, well, 75 to 90% of the human race, right? And really taking out this beautiful little gem of a planet, right? But it doesn't matter because we've done this before, there were other planets in our solar system. This was the slimy reptile planet, right? And that's the guy. Anyway, so this morning I had to get up at 5 a.m. and go to the hospital and basically get a stress test and, lots of testing, right? And it was interesting. I'm not a morning guy, so I'm kind of exhausted right now. I ran a few errands and then I came back here. I was going to do more, but, I'm not a morning guy, so it kind of took a bit out of me. And I haven't allowed them to, like, crack me open. But, maybe if the doctors can make a good enough case for them to do it, maybe I'll let them do it. But I have no real car, and they don't do the kind of operation that I need nearby. I have to go, like, about 300 or 400 miles away. I said, what? There's nobody close. Like, this ain't, rocket science. I said, oh, well, no. And I know what it is. They're going to make more money doing it, right? So I'm going to let God tell me as I, basically, again, this is another one of those great scenarios where I'm letting God tell me what to do. God says, oh, yes, I want you to, I got some other stuff for you to do, so you need to stick around. So, yes, and I'll make sure you get a good doctor. I'll make sure that everything works great, and you'll feel better. You'll be better, and then you can spend the next 20 years doing what I want. Or, if it takes 20 years for you to do what I want you to do, you'll do it, and you'll just, feel like you do now, right? And so, or, you'll have done enough, and I'll take you home, and that'll be good too, right? So, and whatever way it works out, I am God's doula, right? And that's why I'm doing this show, to show you guys what it's about. So what the real deal was that, so I got up early in the morning, and I got there, and I went through all the processes. So I interacted with about 15 people. Right, and I gave them all readings. I told them stories, because we're all waiting around. And this one guy is like in a operating, gown, and they're ready to slice him up. I don't know what they're going to do to him, but he's down there in the X-ray zone, and so, I was reading the nurses and the techs and talking to them about their life and what it is, and every one of them said, I didn't expect to talk to a guy like you today. I've been doing this now. The lady who did my sonogram, she'd been doing it for 40 years. She was one of the first people to do it. So, that's the kind of person I want to do my sonogram. That's the kind of guy, I want the guy who has that kind of expertise, who's going to open me up and play with my heart. So, and if it's they're going to do it like through a vein, they say, oh, well, we might be able to just do it. It's like, instead of like having to stay in the hospital for a week, you can stay in the hospital just overnight. And I said, well, you guys are going to, if you want me to go to this place, you're going to have to give me a ride to get there. You're going to have to take me there. I said, no, we might be able to do that. So, and this one doctor said, so do you like flying helicopters? I said, what? He said, well, we have helicopters flying from this hospital to the hospital that you need to, get operated on. So we could send you, some guy who's like about to die, and he's going to get the emergency version of what you're going to get. You can go with him. Do you like flying on, have you been on a helicopter? Yeah, did it, done it, don't like it. Anyway, so, because helicopters don't fly. They kind of chop through the air, right? So welcome aboard. Here we are, almost 10 minutes, and there's two of you there. One thumbs up. That's really nice. Remember to subscribe, and remember to hit that bell, and remember to go tell other people to watch this show. I got over two, I see people with like 500,000 subscriptions, and we're on our 50th show. Really? I got like, close to 2,000, if not more, on there. And they're all pretty interesting. So anyway, There's a really interesting thing I used to teach. I was a certified Sylvan instructor, right? And I was a shrinky boy, right? And now, shrinkdom, one of its major tenets is that things are projected on you or you project on others. Now that is more a description of what's going on, not so much the cause or the interlocutory, right? And people love to name whatever you have that you have a dysmorphic dysfunction, some kind of dysfunction. Whereas, when I was murdered by the Nazi nun, who came from Buchenwald, and she was known as the Princess of Pain. Basically, she's the one who clocked me and knocked me out. I mean, she didn't really cause me any pain because she knocked me out so thoroughly I didn't wake up for another week and a half, right? In a Catholic hospital, and my head was in a cast, and I couldn't see, and I had 2 straws up my nose and one in my mouth to suck water, and they also had IV on me, and I had 2 little holes, for my ears, so they could drain them, not so much so I could hear. But I heard this one nun said, "Oh yes, he's going to have a frontal lobotomy as soon as the inflammation in his brain goes down." And I was going, it's like Shaggy, and I didn't know whether to say, "Hey, I'm awake and I can hear what are you talking about?" Because I knew what a frontal lobotomy was. Even at 7, I knew what a frontal lobotomy was. Because I'd rather have a bottle in front of me than a frontal lobotomy. Yes, I knew that. And what's his name? What's the guy who coined that phrase? It was another hillbilly, Freebird, a friend of my mentor, Adam Purple, told me that one. So anyway, and that's why I had all these grown-ups telling me things that mostly grown-ups don't tell kids, right? When I was, we lived up near Columbia and Barnard and about 4 theologic universities and a big, what was Kaufman's, this guy, Bishop Kaufman, who was super anti-war, and he had a big basilica, and he had all kinds of meetings. I mean, if you wanted to do anything, he would back you. You want to start marching, he'd back you. If you wanted to, whatever you wanted to do, he was there. He saw that Jesus was there to manifest a better world, and he was going to do his best with what limitations he had and what resources the basilica had. He was going to do it. So I would hang out there at PS 144, which was New York City's science and art school, right? Everybody who kind of went on to Juilliard or MIT or Stanford out of New York's public school system, or NYT, or upstate New York, or NYU, right, came out of that public school. And in that public school, it was, like I said, it was right on in Columbia's campus and Barnard's campus, and we got to play around with whatever was there. And my grandma, so when I was between the age of 3 and 6, when my grandma had to go do stuff that I wasn't going to go with her, instead of like leaving me home or leaving me, she would often, when I was younger, she would just leave me with Mamo, and I would stay on the tit and play with them. But Mamo started to work more, started her own little business, and was doing well. And the kids were, everybody was, you see, the beauty of Harlem at the time was, it was like post-Renaissance, so it was even better. And everyone was doing, no one was hanging on, no one was hanging out, no one was looking to get over. Everyone wanted to do something that was amazing, that would push them forward, right? Everybody. And Second Avenue wasn't black people. It was like every kind of white person that was in Europe. Lithuanian, Estonian, Polish, Greek, Italian, Irish, and not only those guys, but every flavor of all those guys. Right? They were like 20 different Estonian types, right? And the same things with the Poles. All the Baltic guys, there were lots of different versions of them because everybody was back in the day being conquered, moving in, moving out. And so that's kind of what Ukraine, big time Ukraine. My buddies were Ukrainian. I knew Russians. There were Russians there. And they weren't all Jews either. There were a lot of everybody else, right? Orthodox, everything you could think of. And every 2 blocks, it was a different one, different language, different smell of food, different restaurants, different everything, right? And in those, in PS 144 and 141, you heard like 20 different languages. And no one said, well, there you guys speak English. Well, the immigrants showed up. Kids were born in America. Those kids learned English. But everybody else kind of learned English. But because they were living in neighborhoods where everybody spoke their own language, they did. So that's where I got my ear from, right? And so I had this, just my whole life has been this great opportunity that has been fueled by catastrophe, right? Right. So the first year and a half, I was a dead man walking. I was always in the emergency room. That's why I wasn't living with my parents because, A, I was electrocuting my mother, but B, she already lost 2 kids from, not really caring too much, right? Not like she killed them, but my parents, to get a car, drive a car, you need a driver's license. It'd be nice if in America we made everyone get a parental license. And if you had a parental license, the state would pay for your food, your kids' education, your health care, all the rest. And then we'd have but see, the power brokers don't want that. They don't want a well-educated, healthy community. And they want as many divergent folks so it can be divide and conquer. That's the Roman motto, divide and conquer. And that's what we're having right now. But most people don't realize that Donald Trump and Biden are just 2 wings of the, crypto, neo-fascist, crony capitalism. We don't have real capitalism. That's competition. Back in when I was a kid, there were 50 meat companies, that had got the cows, slaughtered them, packed them, sent them off to the supermarket or restaurant or whatever, right? Now there's 2, pretty much same thing with grain, cereals, 2, right? They buy up all their competition and there is no competition. It's crony. That's why they keep 2. That's why we have Burger King and McDonald's and they're always right next to each other and they both do fine, right? They're not really competing, right? And so, but they knock everybody else out of the competition. So that's what we got going on, right? And so we have that going on in a globalist kind of sense. So that's why we had 50 years of globalism. And now when we had everything working fine, we are going back to a not just a unipolar or a bipolar, but we're going to have a multipolar, but they will be within, cadres, right? And so China, Russia, Nicaragua, Cuba, a few others, and they're not even communist, right? We don't have, it's not an ideological thing anymore, right? So the way to deal with this is that you have to have a consciousness, right? And that consciousness is love's co-creation, right? God, right? And within every cultural or social dynamic, you see there is a higher power, whether it's political or religious. But when it's theologic, spiritual, we have God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost. No, they are the one. There's one God. They're just three parts, right? Doing three different things. That's all. So, the Elohim, which we can't even comprehend, couldn't come down to earth. So we had the virgin birth, and before it we had John the Baptist, who was the boy who was running, distraction for Jesus, right? And so, and also was the heralder of Jesus. So there, John the Baptist, he was almost a virgin birth because his parents were like in their 90s when they had him, right? When the angel said to John the Baptist's father, who was in the temple in the place of the high holies, he said, "Listen, your wife's gonna have a baby. You and your wife, not like it's gonna be something other than you and your wife stooping." And he was going, "What are you talking about?" He says, "I can't even get it up." And forget about it. She's so dry down there, it's like the Gobi Desert. And the angel said, "Hey, God says it's so it's going to be so. If you keep talking like this, you're not going to be able to talk." And the guy goes, "Well," he starts laughing at the angel. He goes, "What are you, drunk? What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be in here." He can't say a word, right? So the angel fills him in on a few details, and he says, "Listen, you'll get your voice back once the kid's born." And, if you go and look at the Old Testament, there's tons and tons and tons of wise men. There's the minor wise men, the big wise men. The big wise men is like, Isaiah and Daniel and David and Abraham. Those are the A-listers. And then there are a whole bunch of other guys who are just as important and in a lot of ways more important because they're like the cheeky monkeys. They say it with a twist. And so you really have to be what did I just say? Huh? So, and that's where we're at. What did he just say? Huh? So, all I can say is I am God's slave, right? And Jesus is my arbiter, and I'm a servant to Jesus. I'm apostle to Jesus. And I do exactly what Jesus says, right? Because he's God, right? So I'm a slave to Jesus also. But to get to the Elohim, I have to go through Jesus, right? And I am the Spirit. We're all the Spirit. All the AR is the Spirit, right? And you can understand this by simply go Google Sylvan Mind Control, because his process is a very, very, very good process. And it's very simple. Anyone can do it. I used to teach people how to do it. And I can teach you how to do it, And if you want, I've done a number of, live meditations for you guys. You seem to like them, but you don't really seem to get anything out of them. No one seems to really, practice makes perfect, Now, Jamie does a pretty good job. Who's this other guy here? I wish you guys would put your titles in capitals. I don't have my glasses. Where are my glasses? What did I do with my glasses? I don't know what I do with my glasses. Anyway, what can I say? Oh yes. So how you do the and there's another, like I was kind of getting into what a shrinky guy does, right? And talks about what kind of something that you could find in a textbook. Oh, this is what's wrong with a guy. He's dual personality disorder. He's got autism disorder. He's got blah, blah, blah disorder. No, these things aren't disorders, because when I was murdered by the nun and saved by Bishop Cardinal and Dr. Black, they kind of settled me, got me to the point where they could crack me out of my my cast. And I still had a beanie, I had a beanie and this thing that went down here under my neck and kept everything in one place. But it was not, I mean, when that first cast was, I looked like a snowman, or a worm. Anyway, however you want to look at it. But anyway, when I went off to the Marinols in Garden City, and they put me back together, they taught me these things. They were the ones who were talking about, and in reality, silver mind control wasn't a thing yet, but it was. Anyone who was in the consciousness community, they understood this because, lots of St. Augustine was into this. Lots of different folk had, this is nothing new. Silverman kind of discovered, and he was just a humble worker, and he was interested in psychology and also the potential of the human mind. And so he started, thinking about that, which brought him into deeper and deeper thought. Once he got there, he started having insights, and he started to realize about alpha sleep and beta sleep and theta, right? And delta. And, and that was scientifically understood, And so he's reading about that, and he read about how Edison would take naps in the afternoon and have a little metal ball like marble in his hand and a metal plate, like a dish, and he would have his hand and above it, and he would go to sleep just as he was getting into a dream state, right? Where he could travel through time and space. He would drop the marble onto the metal pan, and he'd wake up. And so he kept going in and out of these highly dimensional dream states, right? And so Silverman started studying all this, and then the Russians had loads of ESP stuff that they've been studying since, the turn of the century, the turn of the century meaning from 1890s to, there was a whole, in America and in Europe and all around before the First World War, there were all of these mystery schools and that had come out of the East, right? And there were all these people like the Theosophical Society, Madame Blavatsky, going after this higher consciousness, try to understand what it is, right? And so one of the reasons why World War I happened was that this was like catching on fire across the human race, not just rich and scholarly people, everybody and his brother, like the guy who was called the Sleeping Prophet, and they have that, his little institute, he was long gone, but he would dream, he would see things in his dreams, the Sleeping Prophet. And the powers that be said, well, man, we can't let this loose, right? We can't, and Post and Kellogg's were making like eco villages, putting people together, growing food that was organic, and then packaging it and bringing it out to the masses so the masses could have healthy food that would serve to build their ability to be good human beings. And can't have that. So everything went corporate, and we had World War I, which, brought on industrialized, profitable war. War was never profitable. I mean, it did. You conquered a place, you went in there, but it still cost money to do it. And even if you conquered somebody, you still had to run the place, The folks in Israel are starting to realize this because, they just want to get rid of the Palestinians. They want the land. They don't want the Palestinians, right? And so that's why they're going to kill them all, right? And they're working on, and see, the good portion of the rest of the industrial world, that 1/10 of 1% wants the Palestinians to die, because the Palestinians are a breed, a caste, a people that are almost, you can't kill them. They're like cockroaches. You can step on them, squish them, make their household a mess, but you can't get rid of them. And so that's what, and that's, see, the thing is, the Jews are the Palestinians. That's the interesting thing. Genetically, if you were to take, the DNA from the kids in the strip and the Jews and put them together, they are identical, right? Pretty much all humans are, but these guys really are. And that's why they're fighting, because they are, Mommy loved you more than me. Anyway, so all you have to do is go into a dream state. That's why the name of the show is Dreamy Dreamland, with Sensei Al Bob. Sensei, I'm your teacher, right? And if you were to listen to these shows, right, you can go back and listen to them. Listen to them, right? 3 or 4 times, you would go into state. Meaning, I tried to teach you how to do it. You guys didn't really do it. So every time I go and do this, I put myself into state, and now I'm in state. I am that pebble being dropped into the pond of the World Wide Web. And that's why I don't really care about, anything. I just keep doing the show because God keeps telling me to do it. And it has an effect. There are about 100 of you out of the 8,000 who actually listen to the show sporadically. And 90% of those people haven't subscribed. Come on, subscribe, thumbs up, hit that bell. Let's get a little over the top, right? But I'll still keep doing this, I'm kind of just under 1,000. And, it'd be nice to see a K or two each show, right? There's enough of you guys watching it. But see, since you wouldn't listen to my doing guided meditations, and half of you guys would fall asleep or just hang up, even though a lot of you said, "Oh, that was great, the best thing. Oh man, I saw things I never knew." Blah 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 blah. Oh, yeah, I'm trying to tell you this. And why the name of the show is Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob, come on. It's, I'm telling you exactly what I'm doing here. And I give you a lot of data and play other people's things so you can see them and realize that all of this stuff that is being fed to us as a catastrophe and end of times, not going to happen. Sorry. The worst it's going to get is like Blade Runner, right? And most people won't know whether they're a facsimile or real, right? Anyway, so because a lot of people don't realize a lot of folks have been taken off planet, right? We got to, back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of flying, it looked like a cigar, And basically what it was the Germans had been contacted by dimensionals, and so had we, the United States. Tesla, he thought it was people in Venus, but, he had, and the Manhattan Project wasn't about the atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project was called the Manhattan Project because Nikola Tesla was in Manhattan. He was the project. That's why Donald Trump's uncle, John, went and dove into, that was the guy, the FBI and Uncle John went and took all of Tesla's, notes away. He went through them all and took what he thought was important. And what little was left was the Russians were in the hallway waiting to get their crack at it, right? And you have to realize Russians, this whole war in Ukraine is a scripted thing. The Soviet Union has always been the Soviet Union and Russia has always been the corporate Masonic imperialist lodges, basically what is known as the loyal opposition, right? So we're always threatening to blow each other up with nuclear weapons. And we're not going to do it until we want to really scare the crap out of the human race. And, that's what we're going to have. It won't be all out, end of times nuclear war. It'll be, maybe somewhere between 10 and 60 strikes. all across the planet. And in each of the countries that get struck, the powers that be in those, the guys who represent the hidden hand in that country will figure out what place they want to, obliterate. Just like, so I was, at the hospital, and on the TV screen, they were showing the big ship that took down the big bridge in Baltimore. And she goes, "It was an inside job." And I said, "Well, no, not what it was." And, I said, "You got your smartphone?" And she said, "Yeah." So I went on and I went to pictures, and I got this great picture that showed the size of the boat and how the bridge, smashed onto it. I then went on to another picture of the boat coming the other way, and the clearance between the top part of that boat and the bottom part of that bridge was like, a couple of feet, meaning that boat should have never been going through that space, right? And so it loses its power, and it has enough time to get on the radio and say, we got a problem here. And so, the highway department closed down the highway. They already had a good chunk of it closed because they were paving it. And that's the 6 guys who are lost were those guys. But that it was like, 9/11 or something, it was allowed to happen. And so it's 9/11, whether we took it down with, you should, if you're ever inquisitive about 9/11, go read a really good piece of work called Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And that'll give you a good, way better than the congressional investigation, because Congress had amazing resources at its fingertips. It had the national laboratories, top scientists. It had the laboratory of weights and measures, which set all the standards for engineering, right? Had the UL labs. It had a ton of other things. Who did they use? Popular Mechanics, the comic book magazine, right? So, and no one did any structural or materials investigation of the metal, and it was taken off-site and sent to China within 2 months. All the steel was gone, meaning whenever you have a really, like, airplane crash or car crash or, that was, 9/11 was first and foremost a crime scene. And when you have a crime scene, you look at it forensically, and we didn't do that with 9/11. So just the fact that we didn't do that for 9/11, it makes you kind of scratch your head. And the fact that Building 7, which was as many square feet, if not more, than the 2 tall towers, because it was a big, long building off of Varick Street, and it was where the FBI, the CIA, you name all the secret organizations, and all of their documents, like all the stuff about JFK there, all the stuff about lots of things there, right? And all of those things were supposed to come out into the public domain like within the week before 9/11. So, that makes you go, what really happened? So with the big boat, it's a similar thing. What really happened? But Occam's razor just basically, because they had in that harbor, they had big things. Most of the big boats went into, they had these places where cars and other large items were offloaded, right? So they had docks that could, and large boats like that got unloaded there. But the harbor, the old harbor, which is on the other side of that bridge, basically was right where the railroads and the highways and a lot of the byways and the getting the packages off the boats and into warehouses and then into people's houses. A lot of Amazon was there. So it was, I would say, if you want to know why that happened, it was because somebody like Amazon was, making 0.3 of a penny on every box that came off that boat. So anyway, just a little bit of profit, a lot of little profit. Like if you ever saw the first Superman where who's the black comedian? Richard Pryor was, right? And he's like this guy working on a terminal, and he's smart enough to go, hey, I'm entering all these numbers in, and there's all these like quarter pennies, these quarter pennies. What do I do with a quarter penny? And the guy goes, just round it off, just round it down, right? And so he does, and then he makes a little program where he is keeping an eye on how much all of those rounded down numbers are. And, and the next day he has this thing running. He comes back and he sees like, $1 billion in less than 7 hours of rounding down to the penny. So anyway, he takes, not the whole thing, someone might notice, but he takes, if the rounding off down gets somebody $1 billion, he's just going to take, 10 million a day, No one will notice that. And they don't really until he shows up at work in a Maserati, and the big boss looks out the window because the Maserati makes a little bit of noise. And he goes, And he says, so who are you? And so that's the first. So that's where Richard Pryor was in the Superman movie. Anyway, and see, all these movies actually are telling the audience, yo, moron, this is what's going on, right? All the sci-fi stuff is what's going on, right? All the stuff you see on Fox or on any of those platforms, that's what's going on, right? It's getting into that little thing over here. And so when it shows up, you won't be freaked out. You'll just be, oh, yeah, see, I saw that on TV a few months ago. But it doesn't help you out, doesn't make you healthy, wealthy, and wise. It makes you a slave. And so you have to have this consciousness that is connected with God. And that's why I can say, well, because, man, back in the day, in the 70s and late, when I was at the VA, they had a lot of really interesting, they had ultrasounds and all kinds of stuff, not like what they got now, but the beginnings of all of that. And I was, my boss who ran Fort Hamilton, he came in and said, hey, Al, I've been watching you. You're going to be my protege. And this guy's a surgeon, administrator, a bird colonel. My dad's one of those. I know what it means. And I said, and I had real long hair, and I was always wearing a Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses and flip-flops and showing up to work. On a friend of mine, I lent him $500, and then he skipped town. And so he basically, I caught him just before. I said, where's some money? Give me. I said, I don't. And he goes, listen. And he pulls out the title. He goes, here's my motorcycle. I'm signing the title over to you. The thing's worth more than $500. See you later. Bye. Leave me alone. So I did. So I rode around New York City, and it's very cool to ride around New York City in that kind of vehicle. And I didn't ride a lot, and I rode enough to know I didn't want to ride a motorcycle. When I was young and stupid, I laid it down a few times. And then one time I was filling up gasoline. I took a little ride upstate New York. I saw it's turning to fall. I had this cute little girl. She wants to ride on the motorcycle and see the foliage. And the license plate was still, in, I had another 3 or 4 months before I had to get it really tagged and insured and all of the above. So anyway, we go up to upstate, and we go to this place that I used to be a counselor for the boys athletically. It was called Orinda. Some of the best summers I ever had. Took all these super duper ghetto kids, and they got them out of New York. And this was in the 60s, when everything was on fire. And so I was driving up there, and we stopped for gas. And this guy goes, "Wow, that's a 1954 Harley, blah blah blah." I mean, he knew what exactly it was. And he said, "Oh, did you lay this thing down?" I said, "Yeah, just a little bit." And he goes, "I'll give you $2,000 for it." I said, "Really?" I said, wow, where do you live? And he goes, up there. I said, well, we were kind of heading in that direction. We were going to go. He goes, why'd you come to my house? I live right, I got a pond and a waterfall, and I'll drive you back to New York City in my truck, yeah. So went there, and what's he doing? He's growing herb on his farm. No one seems to notice. So, not only do I get cash, that's why he had cash, he gave me, you want a few bales of this stuff? Sure. And so we drove us back to the Lower East Side, and I made a nice chunk on that too. So anyway, I was at Fort Hamilton at that time, and so I basically was learning all this stuff about medicine and technology of medicine, right? And we're developing. He sent me off to every kind of alternative doctor. He sent me up to where was it? Davenport, is that Iowa? The last school for osteopaths. So I went to that school. I learned to be an osteopath and a, chiropractor and a physical therapist. And then in Chinatown, I studied acupuncture and Chinese herbal medicine, right? And then my mentor, my Shinto priest, I went up to Putney, Vermont, and helped him build his Shinto and his Hambu and his school. And I think it's still there. If you were to Google, Putney, Eastern medicine, he was a Shinto priest, Shinto temple, any of the above. And so, in a year and a half, man, I really had, I was practicing medicine in the, DPL, deep psychic loving, right? So I was using psychology. I was going to NYU studying psychology. I was up at Columbia studying psychology and theology. I was mixing the two together. My other godfather, Thomas Merton, who was my mom's boyfriend, he was getting into that. And we started a thing called deep psychic loving. And when I kind of stumbled onto, Sylvan mind control, it was just what we were doing, And Silva did a really much better job. And that's why I went, they had a place in New York, and my boss sent me to them. They kind of said, wow, you already know how to do this, but you're not using our nomenclature, but that's cool. We're going to tune you up and turn you into one of our teachers, which I did, right? So at their place, I taught the Sylvan School of Mind Control. And see, I didn't like the idea of mind control because that's the external. See, Sylvan was really good at understanding the dynamics of the psyche, right, and consciousness. He just used the more mundane nomenclature from psychotherapy and medicine. Ancient, not ancient, but stupid medicine, right? The kind of garbage shit that we got now. So I was across the board doing every kind of medicine you could imagine. And then, in 74, when we had put together an amazing protocol of acupuncture, like all these kids were coming from Vietnam because they got blown up out there in the field. Helicopter would save their life by picking them up and take them to a MASH hospital, which would, save their life. And then they would go to Tokyo and get a few more operations so they could travel. And if they were on the East Coast, they would travel to Germany and then to America. And if they were on the West Coast, they would go to the Philippines and then to America. And those were both 2 10-hour airplane rides, right? And depending on which way you were going and what kind of weather you ran into. And so you didn't want these guys who were really screwed up, who were in pain and, in these kind of banana hammock gurneys, and they would stack the kids in those airplanes, not in seats, but in these gurneys, and on top of each other. And so you'd have 130 to 200 of these guys in a sack, in this gurney, on these airplanes. And what they would do is they'd hook them up to morphine and knock them out, right? And so morphine's a pretty safe drug. It's really, really hard to OD, especially if you're on a insulin drip, right? So you can really control what's going on. So you have some nurses and doctors who know what it is. They check these guys every 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and dial them up, dial them down. But when they would get to their final destination, like Fort Hamilton was one of those, they would be stone cold addicts and totally, no legs, no arms, half a head. And what do they got to live for? And so they just stayed addicts. And then how they would get them out the door was hook these people up to methadone. And methadone was a drug developed by the Nazis. It was called aldolphamine. And so we have a receptor here and here and here and here that opiates have an effect on. But really, nicotine and caffeine have more of an addictive effect to those spots than morphine does, right? So you can get off of morphine. It's painful, and it's emotionally, and that's what we did. We built a strategy to get them, because you can put an earring in an acupuncture point in your ear, and it like that get you off physical addiction to opiates. Now, the emotional, the psychological, different story. It takes group and other kinds of therapy, and not internalized therapy, like mommy hurt me or the trauma of being blown up. Those are things, but those are more actions that have happened to you, not who you are. Why you may or may not be screwed up psychologically is because there are component parts in yourself. There is the component part of you that judges you. There's a component part of you that has self-loathing and doubts yourself. And so there's about 16 different of these parts, and they are parts of you. They aren't external. They didn't happen because something happened to you. Now, your body that outside external thing can affect those things and make them do those things that the big textbook of disease says what you got. But when they try to figure out how to get you undiseased, they make it worse, right? Through drugs, through cutting this off or pulling that out, or any of the above, right? So, when I died, 2014, at the weight of 480 pounds, and they were about to crack me up, give me a quadruple bypass, take out 20 feet of my colon, and stick a colostomy bag on me for the rest of my life, and cut my legs off. And they had me knocked out, because if you hear this drug, fentanyl, that was invented to knock you out so much that if they got your chest open, you don't wake up. Well, they were rolling me into the emergency room to do all this to me, and I woke straight up and said, "What are you guys doing?" And it freaked them out. Half of everybody ran away. The one doctor who was responsible of, administering the drugs, he had to stick with me. So he said, "I can't believe you're awake. How did you do it? You should be totally stone cold next to death. You got so much fentanyl in you. I'm just keeping you on the hairline." And I said, "Put me back in that ICU, or I'm going to own you and your family and your kids, and I'm going to turn them into." Well, your lawyer said he doesn't. He's not my lawyer. He is my client. He wants me to do something in 3 weeks, and I'm sure the surgeon told him that, let us operate on him. He'll be good to go in 3 weeks. And I would have been dead. So I had him take me down to his place down in the Keys. He got a colonic therapist. He got me an endocrinologist. He got me a healing. He got me about 10 different people, massage therapist, physical therapist, you name it, right? Herbalist, acupuncturist. And they worked on me for 2.5 weeks. And I dropped, in those 2.5 weeks, I dropped 40 pounds. And I got, I cleansed my colon, I got it clean as a whistle. all that gunk was getting out of me, all the poisons were getting out of me. The acupuncture was having me, I was releasing everything. And so, within a month, I wasn't quite, I was in a wheelchair. I was in a wheelchair for a good year. And when I could get out of the wheelchair, I had metal clamps on me. I was kind of like FDR, right? And so I did that, and I kind of got back to the school, and I had a nice chunk of change and investments, and it was 2014, and so I had all of my like stocks and properties and things like that. In 2006 and 7, when they were at the zenith, just like they are now, I sold everything, right? And then around 2009, I started buying stuff back, and not property too much. I mean, I did, no, I didn't. I did get some properties that a buddy of mine who is I work for all these lawyers. He was a really interesting guy, and his wife was even more interesting. So he was a corporate lawyer, but he and his wife, who went to law school together, they decided, screw this. While we're young, we've just made a nice chunk of change. Instead of running after a desperate lifestyle, we're going to buy. They both like to sail. They bought themselves a really nice sailboat, very comfy, not tremendously gigantic, but big enough to go out on the sea with, and that the two of them could, sail the boat. It had technologies that one person could sail the boat, but two made it pretty good. And every now and then they would get guys like me to go with them on trips, and they get 3 or 4 or 5 people, so it'd be interesting. And even though we weren't sailors like they, so anyway, I was, when they came back from those trips, around 2006, they had lived on the money they made in the corporate world for about 10 years. And so they were going to come back. And she was going to be the lawyer for the down, the people who couldn't get, representation. She would do it. And she wouldn't be a state given. She would pick and choose the people. She worked for ACLU and all different kinds of things like that, and really didn't work for them. She worked for herself, but she would do these amazing things and always win. She was a great lawyer. And the corporate world and the state guys, why are you doing that? You can make a fortune. You made a fortune. Why are you're not really, so you're making $100,000 a year. She goes, that's all I need. And her husband, on the other hand, he was like Better Call Saul, meaning he didn't go back to the corporate world. He went and worked for the corporate world, but like me, he took a page out of my book. He was a consulting lawyer. I mean, I wasn't even a lawyer. I was just a consultant. And so he and I did that. So anyway, where my parents, die in 2008, this is 2006, they come back. And it's anyone who had any eye on anything knew that real estate and the stock market was going to just crash, right? Because it had kept doing it, what happened in 91, the dot-com bubble, what happened in 86 with the savings and loan collapse, what happened in, it just every 10 or 12 years there'd be a collapse. And a lot of people would make money and a lot of people would lose their shirts. And usually the people losing their shirts were the working class or middle class. So my dad thought he was a really rich guy. He worked real hard, had this company after he got out of the Air Force. My mom had some great ideas, and my brother was, slave labor. And my brothers and sisters, worked for my dad. Like I say, me, never touched it, right? Did my own thing. So, bottom line, I'm there, from, when was it? I guess 80. 80, I came back from Ireland. The world, America had changed. Ronald Reagan, George Bush, and just and the collapse, the economic collapse that started in '68 and '72 with the oil embargo was because the economy collapsed, not because the Arab said you're not having any more oil. they weren't selling oil to us because we weren't using it because our economy collapsed worldwide, right? I mean, I keep telling the story. I work for the guys who owned Restaurants Associates, and they own the restaurant on top of the World Trade Center, Windows on the World, and they had their office on top of that, this mezzanine on top. And I would go up there because I was helping them build and do a lot of things. And I was a consultant, so I would show up on Fridays, and they give me an envelope. And because I didn't work 9 to 5, every day of the week, they had a project for me, I would go take care of it, right? And but I would show up there every Friday because what our tradition was, they had really good single malt liquor. They had Paddy's Irish Whiskey, which I really love. And you couldn't get it in America because that was the gun money of the IRA. They could get it. They could get anything. That was really, I mean, they had all these restaurants to kind of, show that it's like the mob who's dumping tons of billions of dollars into this neck of wood to kill the place, to basically show, look, they're laundering money. So anyway, and China is the biggest part of the mob. China was made what it was to be part of the mob because they had a culture of it. Same with Japan. Japan has a yakuza, right? And so it's all one big mob with different cultural aspects, right? And that's what you call sin. The mob is the human race ignoring God's love, right? And shit happens. And maybe people get a little enlightened about stuff, and maybe they learn something, and maybe they change their life. Doesn't really happen that often, right? People, I was born again. Well, what are you doing now? Well, I come to church every now and then. Yeah, okay. And so, what are you doing every day of the week? What are you doing? Well, you got to pay your bills, Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, me. I don't live that way anymore. I've sold everything except the place I live in. That's it. That's really the only thing I have. So I can't be shushed away, right? And I got a bunch of, I'm whittling through all the stuff I had because I don't go shopping in the stores like I used to anymore. I got tons of it. Like, this shirt here, right? This is almost 8 years old, but it was still in the bag, because when it was getting closed out at Walmart's, it was $2 like 10 years ago, right? Now you buy it, it's $30. Same shirt, they still making the same shirt, but it's $35, right? So anyway, so that's my life, right? And that's what God wants me to do, so that's why I'm doing it. If God wants me to have that heart operation, I'll do it, right? Doesn't want me, no problem. Wants me to die, no problem, right? Because every morning I wake up. See, everyone doesn't wake up the way I do. I wake up dead. Then, I get one eye open, look around and go, okay, and I breathe in, and depending on how much I can put into my lungs is how much I can put in next time. And by about the fifth breath, I got both eyes open, and I can tell, off the top of my head, to get thermometer, how cold it is or how warm it is, all right. My man cave, I can hear whatever's like falling out of the sky, rain, sleet, whatever, snow. I can tell what it's doing out there, right? Between the temperature and what it sounds like, right? Oh, no one's listening anymore. So I've been doing this now for an hour and whatever minutes. Let's see. What time is it?
Fact that they can just be exempted from providing any kind of care in an emergency room that might relate to somebody who needs to manage a miscarriage. It was interesting that Justice Amy Coney Barrett also made another clarification, and that is to say that these individuals would not know if they were called in, necessarily know that when they have been called in for emergency care to evacuate a youth, that it was because someone necessarily took mifepristone. And then there was discussion about that, including Amy Coney Barrett asking questions with regard to ultrasounds and matters on that note.
And Michelle Goodwin, could you talk about the group behind this alliance, the so-called Alliance of Doctors, the Alliance Defending Freedom?
Well, yes, this is a group. Well, To level set a bit, there has been for some time now an significant infusion of finances, of money that has gone into defeating Roe v. Wade, Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and a legacy of cases that affirmed Roe v. Wade. And that's important.
And women's rights to control their own uterus.
In writing that opinion,
not men controlling their uterus.
Out of nowhere, there was Roe, and then there was Planned Parenthood v. Casey, and otherwise there's no legacy of reproductive rights before the court. That's just not accurate. 40 years before Roe, 30 years before Roe, Skinner v. Oklahoma, the Supreme Court had said that determining your own reproductive future is a human right, it's a civil right, it's a civil liberty. That was a case that involved a man. And then after Roe, there were a legion of cases that continued to affirm Roe. That said, what we have now is an alliance that has been deeply funded, that's been attempting to chip away at abortion rights, both federally and also state by state. Involved in the Dobbs case, involved in the Texas.
And if they can chip away at this, they can chip away at everything. All of the amendments.
They are very active, and they're seeking to.
I see Donald Trump having his own version. You know, he had his own condoms, his own steaks, his own water, his own sneakers, and now he's having his own Bible.
Pregnancy, so it's worth
Make America Great Again Bible.
Is not just involved with.
We're going to have this country a Christian country. Go back to our roots of being a Christian country. No. What is does anyone out there know what the First Amendment is? Come on. Anybody? Anybody? I keep telling you this. Anybody? First Amendment states Congress.
But were you surprised by the tone of the questions? And do you think they're headed toward allowing mifepristone?
I believe that they are towards allowing mifepristone to remain in the marketplace, because the risk is that any other group that would like to have a drug or a vaccine removed from the marketplace could forum shop for the right kind of judge that might lean into what is information that is inaccurate and grant standing to individuals and potentially risk important vaccines from being removed from the U.S. marketplace, which would be a risk to us all, to children, to adults, and also globally.
Michelle Goodwin, professor of constitutional law and global health policy at Georgetown.
First Amendment.
Founding director of the Center
Congress will make no law to have a religion run by the government.
Issues with Michelle Goodwin.
Separation, the most important thing in American constitutional law, separation of church and state. That's the First Amendment, not free speech.
My father, an abortion saved my life. Up next, a state legislator in Arizona speaks from the Senate floor, explaining why she's about to have an abortion. Just back from that abortion, she'll talk about why it was so important to take her personal agonizing decision public. Stay with us.
Have you guys read that book, Handmaid's Tale, seen the TV show? That's what we're heading towards. Yeah, have you seen Philip K. Dick's story about a man in a high chair, right? That's what I constantly talk about, the high table and the hidden hand. Hail Hydra, kids, hail Hydra. Now, individually, me, like I said, I'm doing what God is telling me to do, right? I don't hear voices, right? No. But I do feel things in my heart. I do have this thing called empathy, right?
All of the Women by Allison Russell. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org.
Look at my eyes.
Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As we continue on the issue of reproductive rights, we're joined by Democratic Arizona State Senator Eva Birch. Last week, she made headlines when she gave a speech on the floor of the Arizona State Senate, where she shared her plans to get an abortion after receiving news that her pregnancy was non-viable. State Senator Birch spoke about her struggles with fertility and miscarriage she had over a decade ago.
2 years ago, while I was campaigning for this Senate seat, I became pregnant with what we later determined was a non-viable pregnancy. It was a pregnancy that we had been trying for, and we were heartbroken over it. But now I wish I could tell you otherwise. But after numerous ultrasounds and blood draws, we have determined that my pregnancy is once again not progressing and is not viable. And once again, I have scheduled an appointment to terminate my pregnancy. I don't think people should have to justify their abortions, but I'm choosing to talk about why I made this decision because I want us to be able to have meaningful conversations about the reality of how the work that we do in this body impacts people in the real world.
That's Arizona State Senator Eva Birch, a former nurse practitioner who worked at a women's health clinic and has been widely critical of abortion restrictions in Arizona.
Now, here in Tennessee and North Carolina, they don't have Medicare. So poor grown-ups
Eva Birch is joining us now
get no health care. Their kids get minimal health care.
Let me start by saying you publicly announced
they both have very, especially Tennessee has one of the hardest up against abortion, right? What has happened is that women's doctors have left Tennessee like a drove. Now, all these people coming from California, Texas, Florida, coming here, they're the largest draw. They are now a third of the population here. And they're rich and they want their abortions. And the women want to have a doctor who will look at her hoo-hoo. There aren't any because a wacko job, state senate had passed all these bills against abortion and birth control and IUDs and. We're heading towards, and they want to make our legislature Christian. That only Christians can run for office in the state of Tennessee.
Arizona, but this is happening.
I don't believe a word I say.
And who the abortion patient is, and really try to break through some of the stigma and some of the misunderstanding about abortion care, and hopefully move the needle in the right direction.
And Senator, could you talk about how your profession as a health provider and a nurse practitioner has influenced your approach to conversations perhaps you've had with other women in similar situations?
Certainly, I worked in the reproductive health care space for some time. I don't work in abortion care because that's not something that's available to me as a nurse practitioner, but I've had patients who were pregnant who had questions, patients who were concerned about whether or not Arizona is a hospitable environment for someone who's pregnant, patients who are unsure about whether or not continuing their pregnancy is the right decision for them. And we have to counsel them with the understanding that our laws here are in flux, that abortion care is not guaranteed in Arizona by any means, not only for patients who are just uncertain about whether or not they want to continue their pregnancy, but for patients who might be experiencing complications in their pregnancy or pregnancy loss the way that I was.
You spoke. Go ahead, Juan.
Can you talk about the reaction since you made your announcement from other members of the Senate as well as protesters, how you and your family have coped with that?
Yes, I have had an overwhelmingly positive response. It has really been moving for me. I've had people sending me letters to the legislature. I have had emails and messages and direct messages on social media to the tune of thousands. And what I'm mostly receiving are people telling me their own stories or just thanking me for giving them a seat at the table. I think that people really don't want to bring people along with them with their abortion experiences. This is highly personal and it's a little bit taboo. And often it's a sensitive subject. People don't want to talk about it, but they want to be heard. And I think people are just really grateful for this opportunity to pull people in and to have a voice, to have a seat at the table. Now, as far as the reaction within the legislature, I haven't had any of my Republican colleagues reach out to me to talk about this, not in the way that maybe I would have hoped for, but I wasn't overly optimistic about that. It wasn't so much about trying to convince my colleagues as much as it was about trying to bring light to what's happening in Arizona so that our constituents can make decisions for themselves and hopefully get engaged in the political process and help us to elect pro-choice candidates up and down the ticket. That's really what we need in Arizona and in this country to make real change.
In one of the articles, many about you, State Senator Birch, they said You said that I was told I could choose adoption. I was told I could choose parenting, which were two things that I couldn't choose. It was cruel to suggest that that was an option for me when it's not. If you could explain that, then also what it was like to have these Republicans walk out on you, one of them, a female state legislator, walking in thinking you were done with your speech, then walking out for the second time.
Yes. So I think that a lot of people don't really understand the ways that laws can be sort of weaponized against patients, not to necessarily ban abortion, but to make abortion inaccessible or a difficult experience, to create a hostile environment in the abortion clinic, to create confusion in the patient and provider relationship. And we have a lot of that in Arizona. There is this mandatory counseling where they have to talk about adoption and parenting as alternatives to abortion, which of course is not always relevant to patients, which is why it should be medical providers who are determining the appropriate counseling for their patients. They also have to talk about the probable physical and anatomical properties of the fetus at the time that your abortion will take place, which again, certainly in my case, but in general is inappropriate and unnecessary. And my pregnancy was not progressing. My embryo was dying and not subject to the probabilities of a normal, healthy pregnancy. So that information was also just factually inaccurate for me, but that's what the providers are required to do because of out-of-touch legislators who don't have any medical professional experience, who are writing the laws and dictating what doctors have to say to patients in that environment. As far as my Republican colleagues filtering in and out and not really listening to what I had to say, I have a couple of thoughts on that. One of them is just that I think that these laws are intended to do what they did. So I don't think that they're surprised by it or concerned about it. I think that really it just reinforces that what they're doing with these laws has having the intended impact. So I don't think that there's necessarily any need for my Republican colleagues to hear what I have to say, because they're not going to make any changes or do things any differently because of that. I will also say that I have good relationships with a number of my Republican colleagues. We disagree on a lot of things. It's really the leadership in the Arizona Senate that is so skewed far to the right. They are extremists, and they really have sort of set themselves up for failure in that way. But I didn't experience anything that I wasn't expecting in the chamber that day.
We just have 30 seconds. If you could respond to the mifepristone oral arguments in the Supreme Court.
Yes, I mean, I can't believe we're even talking about it, to be honest with you. I mean, mifepristone has, 26 years of safety data and is extremely safe and effective medication. I think that we cannot be setting this precedent where we are allowing religious or extremist organizations to be able to go to highly partisan Trump-appointed judges and bring a case all the way up to the Supreme Court. I just really hope that they do the right thing. It's unimaginable that this is where we are with the mifepristone case. We use this medication so much more safely than so many medications that you can buy over the counter. It's an outrageous conversation that we're...
Not only that, mifepristone is for other diseases. So if they get rid of it, other diseases won't be able to be dealt with because that drug won't be there.
Who is designing a highest court in the land for the people of this country, and we have to be so conscious of that and to work so hard to make sure that we are making better decisions in November.
Eva Birch, Democratic Arizona State Senator, nurse practitioner.
The problem is that both Donald Trump and Biden are delivering us, a horrific world. Biden hasn't said to Bibi and the IDF, stop this. He just says, oh, well, we gotta, oh, this is bad. Oh, don't be so mean. No. This whole period since October to now, we have been sending them weapons, killing people. Israel's a small country. They don't have a gigantic military-industrial complex. So we have been, all those smoothbore shells, anti-personnel in their tanks, they've been getting thousands of them from us all this time. I think we've sent them $120 million worth of weapons less than a couple of weeks ago. So this is, this is a world. But see, the interesting thing about this world is that we don't rule. We don't run it. It's not our world. It's God's world, right? It's love's co-creation. And when you step away from love's co-creation, that's the sin. Not jerking off, not, fooling around, not, stealing, lying, cheating, all the rest. Now, those aren't good. The Ten Commandments, that's what they were, commandments. They were guardrails. Stop doing this. Don't do this. Look at, Israel for, hundreds, thousands of years. They, especially before the Ten Commandments, they were just scumbags and lied, cheated, and stealed. And so did everybody else. And that's why we had the Great Flood. The only people who were righteous enough to get on the boat, other than the animals, who were all our relations, were only 8. The rest was scumbags, everybody. But the world kept going, no big deal. We came and reprocreated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that kind of thing has occurred a number of times. That was the big one with the whole planet, but, they've wiped out whole countries, whole, cultures, and they've done that to Israel, at least 8 times, and not killed them all, but destroyed, Jerusalem and destroyed their top-end economy, whoop-de-doo world, and made them slaves. And so that's what I'm saying, boys in Israel, because what I'm saying is going to happen is Israel's just going to keep killing the poor people and in the disputed lands. They want the greater Israel, right? And they don't care to kill 2.5 million people. Not a big deal. And they're doing the most nastiest, what they're doing. It would be nicer if they just nuked everybody and that would have been it. But they're going to end up doing that anyway because that's part of the script. And they're not going to just nuke the strip. They're going to, every place that is meant to be, everything that was taken in the 67 war, that's what Israel wants, and they're going to nuke everybody to get it, right? And they're going to nuke whoever they want. They can't militarily go up against Hamas, right? And they can't military the other guys up north, they can't go up against those guys, right? So they want to drag America into this war, right? And you can already see the American people don't want this, If Joe Biden loses, it's only because of his support of Israel. This main number one thing. But everything else he's doing exactly what Donald Trump, like the thing that would have fixed the border, What's going to happen is we're going to build our own strip on the border. We're going to, and there's something between 6 and 30 million illegal aliens in America. How are you going to get all those people out of America? You're going to have martial law. And I mean real martial law, not just, what happened on 9/11, real martial law, right? And that's why we had, the pandemic, to get everyone the flavor of being locked up in their house, right? And so it's right in front of us, kids. And the only thing, and there's no choice. There isn't a single politician. Oh, I'm going to vote for Kennedy. He's a scumbag too. There isn't anyone there. So what is it? Less of a scumbag that you want? You have to pick up the garland yourself. And in every day and every way, take the piece of the earth and make it stronger. That's the only way it's going to work out. That's what I'm doing. That's why I'm a slave to God and Jesus, right? Not like, praise Jesus, praise God, praise Jesus, praise God. No. I'm a slave to them, right? And I'm a chucklehead, so I'm not perfect, but I keep it in, and I was telling the story about all the porno on my phone. And God does this constantly, my phone's about to die. It keeps saying, you got to shear off some of the stuff you got in your memory there. And I went over to where that was, what they wanted me to get rid of, and I started taking stuff out. And, it took me an hour. And I just want to say, can't I just say, get rid of all porno? No, you have to take each one out individually. And it's like God chuckling at me. You just say, yeah, okay, yeah, have a good time. I mean, it was no big sin to jack off that, but I didn't have to. And by clicking off that, or getting rid of it off my phone, and that it took me an hour and a half to do it, I'm not going to do that again. I mean, there were a couple, I wonder what's on. Nope, not going to do it, right? Same, I go out with people and they, here, have this cookie, have this, have this. No, nope, can't do it. I can have one, That's not bad. But if I eat more than a couple and keep eating them, and then it's like that hole gets bigger and bigger, and you want to stick stuff in it, right? So that's a real major deal, is that you individual, this thing ain't about who you're going to vote for or what product you're going to do, or, no. Now, all those things can be important if you get involved. I mean, so I've been involved politically, socially, economically, you name it, I've been involved in it. And that was a good thing, because it enabled other people, and we made communities, and we made movements. And, we started the no nuke movement. We started the anti-nuclear power movement, because nuclear power, anywhere you have nuclear power, all you're doing is making weapons grade material. That's why the Price-Anderson Act is there. It basically makes it, utilities can make nuclear power, doesn't cost them a nickel. And so, a lot like a Shoreham nuclear power plant, good example. It's supposed to cost $100 million, right? Ended up costing $12 billion, right? Now, if that was having to be paid for by the stockholders, that would have never happened. But because it was being paid by the ratepayers, and the stockholders could make $16 on every over budget dollar that was being spent. Hey, no problem. Well, we made it a problem, right? And everybody, the courts, no media would follow what we were doing. We were getting, hey, hippies, get a job, But once we showed Long Island what was going to happen to them if this plane went online, everyone went, and so that's why it's not there, right? But the economic, and so the rich people use that to redline all of Long Island, so they could push the businesses and the manufacturing out, and they could buy everything cheap and build their nice house on the Great South Bay and out there in the Hamptons. Now, if that's the cost of saving 20 million people, okay, I'm down with that, And that's me. I'm a strategist that has common sense, right? I just don't want 20 million people to die that don't need to die, right? And the wars that are going on, and forget just, Ukraine, and the Gaza Strip and all of that. That's nothing compared to what's going on in Africa. There is this whole line from the Red Sea to the Atlantic, right across Africa, where something close to 20 million people have been, wars going on, their houses have gotten blown up. They're like on the street. They're going through what's going on in Gaza, not as, because that's a big space, so they can walk around a lot. It's not like they're all stuck in that one little city down in the south, right? No, they're all over the place, but they're dying, and no one's doing anything about it. No one's talking about it. There's like 8 wars, something in the last 4 years. Since 2019, 8 million people have died in the war. Like the people who are dying in Gaza Strip, the people who are dying in Ukraine, people who are on the line, the Russian soldiers who are dying. That 8 million people dying like that. No one even says a thing. I'm sure none of you are even aware of what's going on, right? And little do you know, no matter where you are, whether you're in Ireland, whether you're in America, whether you're in England or Europe or any place, Japan, China, that's coming to you. It's called karma, right? That's why I don't care. God wants me to have this operation. I'll get it. No big deal. I know what it is. I've seen it. I know what it, I'm going to make sure that, like I did today, I got the best people in that hospital to take care of me. I wanted the data that they were going to collect on me to be 100% so I can make a decision. Not like, oh, well, maybe we have to do this again. No, I made sure that I got the right people, the best people, and I didn't do it like I was screaming and yelling and jumping up and down like rich people do. No. I said, okay, God, I'm going to do this because you want me to do it. I'm having to get up at 5 a.m, not my most favorite thing to do. I have to drive there in the rain. So it was raining cats and dogs. And I was saying this in bed. Okay. So I told them that if it was raining, I might not show up and we'll have to reschedule. And they said, no problem. But if you want me to go, I can't go, I don't drive at night and it's darker than dark. It's raining and it's foggy. That's 3 strikes, right? So as soon as I said that, it stopped raining. Right? I said, okay, I'm going to throw the covers off. If it's really ridiculously cold, that means it's going to be really ridiculously, foggy. I am going to, because it was, warmer that day, and then it rains, and then it gets cold. When the barometric pressure does this, that's when you can have a lot and real difference in the there's a term for it. But anyway, the moisture in the air to the heat, that's when you get fog. So anyway, I said, if I get out of bed and it's, I can feel the temperature and I want to stay under the, that's it. Got out. Okay. I looked at my thermometer in the man cave. It was 60 degrees. Okay. That means they probably, if there is fog, it won't be like, something I can't see through. Okay. So I get dressed. I pack my things up. I get in the car. And I'm driving on a Forest Service road, but it's not, I don't drive on this road when it's darker than dark and all I have is headlights. And so all the swells that I put up there looked like logs in the road. How did this happen? All these trees fall down to the road. And then God, see, obviously I'm not going. So, instead of backing up and going back to bed, I said, okay, it's not raining outside. I'm just going to keep the motor running, keep the lights on. I'm going to get out and see if I can move. I get out there, and there isn't a single log in the road. It's just a shadow from these little swells I have to carry the water off the road. Anyway, so I start laughing, and I hear God laughing. And so because when I laugh, God's laughing. So, I get in the car, I drive out, and I get, to go out this road, then on the Forest Service road, then on the really crappy road, then on the blacktop private road, then on to, the county road, not even the state road. And so I'm on that, and I'm at the top of the hill, and I'm looking down on either side at who's coming. And because it's darker than dark and there's not a single street light, I can see it's like a little chain of lights. And so they're down, coming up towards me, and then the guys coming up from the other side, that be the direction I'm going. So, okay, there's nobody here for at least, quarter mile. I'm going to get on the road and acclimate myself and see how I do on the road. So I'm and I'm on the road, and then a gigantic tractor trailer, and then a whole line of cars. And then, luckily, this guy comes right on my bumper, right friggin' on my bumper. And so I just take my foot up the gas, right? And so I'm going down a hill, but I take my foot up the gas. And then he comes to a place and he turns off. But if he had been there for the whole time, he'd been right on my bumper. Anyway, so I'm just, saying, okay, God, you got, my hands are on the steering wheel, but you're in control. And I got there in plenty of time. I was the first person. They were unlocking the hospital doors, And I walked in, and they got me a nice wheelchair, and they wheeled me I filled it, and then I just gave them all my cards. They didn't make me, go through any big mojo because they had all me there. And so they wheeled me up, and I got the best a person to do all of the echocardiogram stuff, and then the stress test lady. She was a doctor, not just a nurse, and she knew. I know a lot about this, so I kind of quizzed them on. These people were the best in the hospital, right? And a woman who is like not quite a nurse yet. She's in nursing school. She goes, she's the best, right? And so anyway, and I read everyone's palm, so they all got to like that, and so it took like 4 hours, from 5 to 6, 7, 8, 9. I got out of there about 9:30. They did buy me breakfast. I have to say that they did get me breakfast, and so so I've only, and it was like little scrambled eggs, a little biscuit, and a piece of sausage, and some fruit, right? Banana. So that's all I've eaten today. And I'm not really hungry. I'm going to go get something and eat before, 4, right? So anyway, I don't know how many people are. There's only 1 and 2 thumbs up. How about some more thumbs up? Come on, guys. This is an hour and 35 minutes and 29 seconds. When it's 36:36, I'm out of here. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this.
That was the right decision. But however, the state of Texas is still building out this immigration state force.
And also, the new spending bill that President Biden just signed, it provides a massive increase to ICE detention infrastructure and for more money for the Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. Your response?
Well, that is unfortunate, again, because we know what some extremist politicians like Mr. Greg Abbott is doing already in Texas, which, by the way, other states now are trying to mirror as before, in Georgia and Louisiana. And the fact that the federal government doesn't have an alternative to that, doesn't have not only an alternative policy, but also an alternative narrative to this so-called invasion of criminals, the way that migrants are being portrayed. It just add to the problems, because we don't need more detention centers in the interior or at the border. We don't need more Border Patrol as is in the DHS funding that was just approved. What we needed was more welcoming centers. We needed more accountability and oversight to federal law enforcement at the border, but also we needed for the federal government to stop Texas, stop the governor of what they are doing in terms of enforcing illegally and unconstitutionally as before, that is impacting Latinos, people of color,
and American citizens.
For
American citizens.
What you saw in El Paso, the pictures of people running through the barbed wire, it is how desperate the situation is at the border. Because these state soldiers have barbed wire and this state enforcement, it is illegally impeding migrants and families to ask for asylum, which is
against the law.
It's an international right. It's granted in the U.S. Constitution. So I think that we expected the administration to be more forceful in accomplishing.
Why would you think Biden would be more forceful? 60 years as a senator, he did everything he could to put people in jail, make people poor, make rich people richer. That's who he is.
Resources for detention centers coming from the administration also.
Fernando, we want to thank you for being with us and ask you to stay after the show to conduct this interview in Spanish. Fernando Garcia, founder and executive director of the Border Network for Human Rights, based in El Paso, Texas. That does it for our show. Democracy Now! Produced with Mike Burke, Renee Feltz, Dina Guzder, Sherfa Bokadoos, Messiah Rhodes, Noreen.
So, go watch George Carlin on Netflix, not Netflix, on YouTube. I mean, he says it straight up, this is a 3-card Monty, and, you can't win the game. It's fixed. It's, the only thing you can do, and don't go to your church and expect your church to do anything for this. They're just going to take the money and give it to the rich guys. No, what you had to do is have, and this is what the Bible talks about. This is what the Quran talks about. What the, Torah talks about. This is what all, the Vedas talk about. It's the relationship with the creative force of love's co-creation. That's what it's all about. And if we were to be that, I would love to see some Christians pray 5 times a day, every day, like Muslims do, right? But no, not going to do it. Muslims are just Christians on steroids. They are the Abrahamic tradition. There's first the Hebrew nation, then the Jews, then the Christians, then the Muslims. We're all children under the same book. And the Quran is the Old Testament and the New Testament. That, the whole Trinity thing is just too confusing for most people. Sorry. And the ones who go by it don't even understand it, just kind of mouth the words, which, back in the day and I met some people at the hospital, all retired folk, and you could tell that they were well-to-do, not rich, not Elon Musk, but, they had some kind of job, corporate job, that they probably made a few $100,000 a year, invested in the stock market and a few of this and that. And they bought, just like I did, they bought a farm over near Boone, right? And kind of between Boone and where I am. Now, I don't have a farm, I have 2 acres, right? But they have this nice farm. They had a nice barn, and so they put a nice travel trailer, RV thing in it, and they lived in that while they built their dream house there. And they did all kinds of nice things, and it's really nice. Now, so they had maybe, I don't know, farm, maybe this is a very mountainous thing, so you don't really have gigantic 100-acre farms, Monsanto came here and bought up whatever little of that there was and put Christmas trees and soybeans and feed corn, all GMO, right? And so these people, they had their nice little farm, and the other little farms were sold out to, Maymead and Monsanto and Bayer, to grow basically Christmas trees, GMO'd Christmas trees which is the worst because no one's eating them, and it's not feed going into a cow that someone's going to eat. They hit it with the worst of chemicals just to keep the weeds away and to keep anything else going after that Christmas tree, just so it can grow somewhere between 6 and 12 foot tall and be perfect to be sold for Christmas, right? But it's a toxic thing. And so these people who bought their property before this happened to them, and then it happened around them, and they weren't paying any attention. They weren't involved in the community. They had their nice 50 acres, 60, 100 acres, right? And they're kind of they thought they were surrounded by mountains, because it's like me, I'm surrounded by mountains. But mine are really severe sawtooth mountains. They're mountains, they're more in the Blue Ridge mountain range. So those things you can grow things on. You can cut all the stuff out and then plant Christmas trees, and that's exactly what they did. And so they're making, Monsanto, Maymead, Bayer are making something close to $100 million out of Christmas trees all around them. And they're constantly cutting them down and planting them and spraying the crap out of them. So their pristine, well is now that's why they both have cancer. And they were very nice. And, and they're being imaged. They were both being imaged for cancer, not just one, both. And I said, so how long have you been living there? And they said, we've been there since, we've had the property since 2010, and we built our house. We finished building the house in 12, right? So that's 12 to 22. That's 10 years right there, right? And then another 2. So they bought it in 10. So, they've had it for maybe 15 years, but they've been living on it, drinking that water. I said, when did you put your well in? And they said, around 2011. I said, okay. I said, is that your only water source? You don't get anything from the air, off your of your trellis and, and no springs. And I said, no, we wouldn't, why would we do that? We have this nice well. I said, so did you test your well lately? And they said, no. I said, so what do you think? So you were never sick? Do you have cancer in your family? No, my parents, no. My grandparents, no. So I didn't, I just kept going around the issue, and they did not want to pick up on it. Though, what they now are really upset about is that just on the other side of those mountains, the big developers are building high-rise condos. So that little farm road that they were driving on for the last 15 years, now instead of having just, 3 to 20 people a day riding on it, there's 1,000 people driving on gigantic trucks, and the smell of diesel is everywhere. And that is the problem. When you are not conscious, but you want to get rid of, I lived in California, it was so nice and it was great, but then it wasn't, and it was just terrible. And all those people came in and spoiled it. No, you did. By not having a community, a culture, a society. You just wanted, you enjoyed now I can speak from knowing this because from birth until I was about 62, I was, Mr. Community Guy. Now, I could make I never had to worry about money, and that was never a problem. So I spent most of my effort helping other people because that's what made me happy. And I was good at being an organizer, being a this, being a that, the go-to guy, to being a healer, to being on every level, right? But, after around 2010, after my parents died, and I was starting to work for the corporate world, and I had already done a lot of stuff. And I had a lot of stuff, and it was like had a life of its own. So I just, basically lived the life of its own without any kind of, why I was successful at what I was doing as a counselor, as a negotiator in the corporate world for desperate lawyers, was that I was a nice guy. And I could read people, and I could tell what they really, really wanted, and I would get them that instead of the stupid crap that they were like arguing over. And I could get people not to argue because I don't argue, right? And I had strategies that were pretty amazing, and they worked really, really, really well. And so I could make, people would, those lawyers would say, why don't you work all, I said, what, work 80-hour weeks like you morons do? No, because I would work 11 weeks. I would work, let's say 40. I never did. Let's say 20 hours times 11 weeks is, how much is that? Quick, what is that? So let's say 10 times 20. So that's 200 hours, right? I would make $70,000 a year for working 200 hours. That's all I needed. I live on $400. So I was living high, and these guys love me. They love me being around, right? So, if I wanted to, I could have charged them for just being around them, right? But no, they put me up in really 5-star hotels, took me out to dinner all the time, to shows, flew me around the country, went to Las Vegas, LA, all of it, just that kind of life, flying in their Gulfstreams, all of the above. I had to pay for a nickel of it or show anything because I wasn't working for them. It was just I was their buddy, They didn't give me any cash, They would rent 10 rooms in a super-duper hotel, and there'd always be 1 or 2 suites that didn't get used, but they had them on the billing tab just in case a client needed a place. Anyway, so I lived that life from 2010 till 2014 when I died. And I never lost my consciousness. I never lost my conversation with God. Have any of you guys read that book, Conversation with God? I would suggest you do. And so I basically still had that conversation going. And many a time I would get philosophical and say, so God, am I doing the right thing here? And pretty much the message I got, and it basic as pretty much all of everything I ever did. I never used a magic 8-ball. I would just think about it in my heart and my consciousness, which is my co-creation with God's love. And that's always been my answer. And I would always, do what that was told to me. And basically, I was told that I was not going to be able to understand this kind of lifestyle, the desperate lawyer lifestyle, the totally me-oriented lifestyle, the hedonism, the nihilism, the sociopathic. It's all about me. To be able to deal with it or have something to do with it, to heal it, I'd have to experience it. And that's why we have these bodies. We aren't our bodies. The Christian guys who constantly talk, oh, well, I'm going to die and I'll be all dust and worms for a couple of thousand years. But when it comes back, I'm going to go to heaven in my body. You really want to? I don't think so. No, you are your spirit, right? So this body is just an avatar, to work out things in. And we live in the moment, not the collected history. So that's why history and time is so, it's hard to really fathom. So, that's why we keep inventing new forms of physics, string theory and all the above. So all is as it should be, and every day and every way we take the piece of the earth and make it stronger by following love's co-creation, being that co-creator, right? And so that's what we're doing here. So no one has any questions for me? There's 3 of you there. Come on, how about some more thumbs up? Come on. There's probably 30, 40 of you guys have been watching. Go back and give me, subscribe, hit that bell, thumbs up, tell other people, let's get something moving here, right? Otherwise, your life is going to suck. All you have to do is start, if you haven't, John Birmingham's show, why I'm, A, he's my friend. I don't give up on friends. B, he is, I couldn't even invent that guy, He is the, gilded, caged canary in the coal mine of hedonist avarice, fear, self-loathing, anger, judgment, all of the above, right? And you just got to look at them. You want that life to be yours eternally? Good luck with that. Now, that's not going to, everyone gets to go home, right? But how long is it going to take, That's why, when I died in 2014, I was ready to go home. But, God said, no, sorry, you got more to do. Well, how about giving me specifics and get it done? And he said, no, you just go back. You're doing a great job. We love you. You're doing a great job. Just keep it up, and don't worry about it. I never worried about it. But I'm double downing on not worrying about it. So I'm not worrying about it. So anyway, I'm going to go and make myself something tasty and read my Bible some more and do some writing, right? It would be nice. Anybody out there who are publishers, get a hold of me at the dudewake42@gmail, dudewake42@gmail, dudewake42@gmail. Okay? Okay. Do. Where? Where's that button? Oh, yeah, here it is. Okay, guys. Love you guys. Stay well. Be good. Give me one last chance. Any questions? No, somebody left.